Right. Once again, this is Lita Downs from the Office of Teaching and Learning Excellence, and I will be your moderator today during Dr. Edwin Ngwa's session, Strategies for Developing Sustainable Supply Chain Links with Local Producers. Dr. Ngwa's session is part of the CMHP Virtual Symposium this year. And at this point, I'm very happy to introduce you and hand things over to you. Welcome, Dr. Ngwa.
Yes, thank you very much, Leader, and thank you to everyone for attending this session. I'll be taking you through my DBA study, which is, as earlier mentioned, strategies for developing sustainable supply chain links with local producers. Let me start by letting you know what motivated me to proceed with this topic. My motivation for choosing this topic emanated from my over 12 years experience of working in the supply chain environment in sub-Saharan Africa. I observed that many local producers have challenges in meeting the requirements for supplier accreditation in leading agribusiness buying organizations. The key hindrance that these leading agribusiness buying organizations have in going into supplier commitments with local producers is the limited assurance demonstrated by the local producers to guarantee reliability in the supply of raw materials from a cost, a quality, a time-bound perspective during the supplier accreditation process. So based on my observations and my experiences, I realized that there was a disconnection somewhere, and that caught my interest to carry out some findings by clearly defining business problem within the context of a qualitative research. So I decided that I would explore this phenomenon from the angle of an agribusiness supply chain manager, stroke director, to come up with some practical recommendations that can be implemented to address this fundamental problem. Now, where does Walden University come in? Throughout my DBA program at Walden University, I was equipped and empowered with all the relevant research techniques, methodologies, and some indicators of various conceptual frameworks, which I can use to professionally, structurally, and ethically pick up a problem and drive towards the solution to that problem while creating a significant social impact. I want to seize this opportunity to once more thank my chair, Dr. Franz Gollip, my second committee member, Dr. Teresa New, Dr. Patsy Kaysen, and my DBA program director, Dr. Gail Miles. Now, having set the context, let's have a look at the problem statement on the next slide, please. Now, you can clearly see the hook, the anchor, the general business problem, and the specific business problem, stating that some agribusiness managers lack the strategies to develop sustainable supply chain links with local producers to maintain profitability. And of course, you have some statistics to back up the problem statement at the level of the anchor from a study carried out by Bangezad and Zobel 2020, who found that on average, firms that experience a supply management disruption face an operating income decrease of 27%, a drop in return on sales of 13%, and a drop in return on assets of 16%. As such, agribusiness managers need strategies to develop sustainable supply chain links with local producers that can integrate supply chain collaboration, competitive priorities, and social and environmental dimensions. When I have a recap of my background, the background section of my study, I have studies carried out by Azobi et al. 2020, who argued that companies seek to adopt competitive strategies that achieve sustainability standards, not only in achieving economic success, but also in serving society and preserving the environment. At this point, I want to look at a glimpse of some of the operational definitions used in the study, so that as I flow through the next slides, you can have a vivid idea and I can be able to connect with the message I'm putting across. A local producer within the context of my study is a supplier who supplies raw material inputs to an agribusiness buying organization located in the same business environment. Agribusiness buying organizations require the farm outputs for transformation and or a constituent of its manufacturing processes. When I'm referring to supplier integration, it is a close alignment and coordination within a supply chain, often with the use of a shared management information system. And if I'm referring to supplier orientation, it is defined as the recognition by a company of the systematic strategic implications of the activities and processes involved in managing the various flows in the supply chain. And of course, supply chain performance refers to the extended supply chain's activities in meeting end consumer requirements, including product availability, on-time delivery, and all the necessary inventory and capacity in the supply chain to deliver the performance responsively. Now, this statement leads us to the next slide, where I'll be looking at the significance of the study and the implications for positive social change. So I think that should be the slides before. Leader, I think that should be the slides before. If you go back where you have, yes, that one. Thank you. The purpose statement, significance of the study and the theory and or framework. Here I articulate on the fact that this study will broaden the availability of reliable food supply through communities and also potentially increase the number of direct and indirect jobs. The purpose of this qualitative multiple case study was to explore the strategies agribusiness managers use to develop sustainable supply chain links with local producers to maintain profitability. I used the qualitative method to ask open-ended questions to explore the knowledge and experience of participants on the phenomenon in question as prescribed by Yin 2018. Most notably, the multiple case study design is a qualitative design used by researchers to systematically gather information on how systems operate by having an in-depth exploration of multiple bounded systems and multiple forms of data collection. Within the context of my study, I used the value-based supply chain as a lens to support my exploration of how agribusiness managers develop and deploy strategies to build sustainable supply chain links with local producers to maintain profitability. The value chain was first described by Porter in 1985 as a set of activities that a firm operating in a specific industry performs to deliver valuable product for the market. So Stephen and Pirog in 2008 continued from the work that Porter started in 1985 to come up with the value-based supply chain model, which provides greater visibility of the economic stability for producers and other stakeholders along a supply chain and provides insight on ensuring the delivery of high quality products to consumers. It is on this premise that I proceeded to differentiate between a traditional supply chain and a value-based supply chain in my literature review. On one of the differentiation highlights in that is that the value-based supply chain are characterized by long-term networks of business partners who seek to create what you call strategic alliances and maximize value for all partners in the chain. So you can clearly appreciate the suitability of the value-based supply chain conceptual framework in relation to the problem statement as previously stated. That said, we can move to the next slide that talks about the participants and the sample size. All right, good. Thank you. Effective participant selection is critical to getting robust results in any qualitative study. That's based on the inspiration from Yin 2018. I use what is termed the purposive sampling to select participants, because purposive sampling helps the researchers select participants who have experience, knowledge, and understanding of the research question. For this study, the participants were agribusiness supply chain leaders with a valuable understanding of the phenomenon. The targeted population for this study consisted of agribusiness managers who had operated in Cameroon and had developed sustainable supply chain links with local producers for more than 5 years. I designed my study to comply with Walden University's Institutional Review Board's ethical requirements for assessing participants to receive approval and to proceed with what you consider as the data acquisition. So I built trust and relationships with the participants by obtaining informed consent, employing effective interview skills, and maintaining confidentiality. Now, this takes me to the next slide, wherein you have visibility on the procedure I followed and how I carried out my data analysis. The next slide, please, that talks about the research question, the procedures, and the data analysis. Remember, this presentation is a microcosm of the macrocosm. So what I mean by this is that I am taking you through the study headlines so you can have an appreciation of, or a high-level view of my research journey. That said, I conducted semi-structured interviews and reviewed company documentation under an interview protocol. In each interview, I followed the steps of the interview protocol, asking 6 open-ended semi-structured interview questions. To enhance the veracity, validity, and credibility of the data collection process, I used member checking. For your information, member checking is a data collection method that establishes a two-way conversation between the researcher and the participants around every stage of the process of data collection as a means of achieving data saturation by giving participants the ability to read the researcher's interpretations and provide any corrections or additional information. Member checking also enhances data saturation by checking to examine and confirm interview data for corrections, additions, or complete deletions if the participant decides to back out completely. Yin 2018 recommended 5 phases for data analysis. You have the compiling phase, the disassembling phase, the reassembling phase, interpreting, and drawing conclusions phase. For the purpose of my study, I use a software called NVivo 11 to organize, analyze, and identify themes from the data I collected. I wish to also highlight at this point that it is necessary to proactively learn and have a hands-on knowledge on how to use the software, whichever software you choose. I know there are other softwares like Atlas, whichever software you choose before you get to the stage wherein you have to carry out your data analysis so that you can optimize your study timelines. If you get into the data analysis stage when you don't have a good mastery of the software, that might be detrimental in terms of how you manage your time. I followed Yin's 5 phases while using what is termed methodological triangulation. This is use of multiple methods simultaneously in the belief that where one is uncertain about the reliability of any given method, if multiple methods yield the same answer, that answer is confirmed more strongly than it could have been by any single method. I accomplished methodological triangulation by gathering data from through conducting semi-structured interviews and reviewing other company documentations, as you can see in the slides. Now, can we look at the findings on the next slides? All right, thank you very much. The findings. I identified key themes through detecting and classifying the reoccurring ideas, phrases, and the words drawn from the participants' interview responses, additional information gathered in member checking sessions, and secondary data sources. The secondary data sources here refers to the additional company documentations which I obtained from the different sources as previously articulated in the slides we previously covered. I compared and contrasted the emergent themes to the published findings of other researchers from my literature review and the conceptual framework. So here you look at the correlation between the findings and what previous researchers are saying in your literature review, as well as what is aligned to your conceptual framework as previously reviewed in your literature review as well. On the first theme, 2 strategies were used by participants to ensure efficient forecasting and planning of deliveries from local producers. These include adopting integrated planning and delivery risk assessment and management. These strategies were implemented to ensure that local producers deliver the quality and quantity of production inputs required by buying organizations. On the second theme, 5 factors were considered when engaging and communicating with stakeholders in the value chain. This include promoting transparent communication, implementing fair pricing, soliciting government arbitration, promoting recruitment of quality human resources, and ensuring food security. On the third theme, 4 strategies were used by participants to organize and coordinate value chain operations. Here I'm referring to aggregating local producers, developing customized logistics solutions, ensuring against unforeseen events, and reducing environmental pollution. On the fourth theme, 3 sub-strategies emerge, and these were used by participants to promulgate favorable financial management practices. These include financial activities of local producers, analyzing what is considered as total cost of ownership from a procurement perspective, and of course, storage cost optimization. That said, let's look at the next slide wherein we'll be looking at the interpretation, the limitation, the recommendations, and social change implications of my study. The strategies identified in the current study have been successful for agribusiness leaders to build the capacity of human resources in the value chain and ensure food security. Tangible improvements for individuals, communities, and organizations are possible as referenced from the different teams that I previously identified in the data analysis. The capacity building strategies deployed by participants could guide agribusiness managers on how to make high value social impact decisions. Participants revealed that the training of supply chain stakeholders in value chain principles and knowledge is indispensable in raising the quality of services rendered across the value chain. Most notably, training workshops organized by participants serve as a medium through which participants aligned all stakeholders along the value chain to a common vision. Participants also commented that direct and indirect jobs were created across the value chain, with suppliers and those employed experience an increase in purchasing power. At this point, I will highlight a situation wherein the sales of the final product of a buying organization actually increased significantly in the community because of the positive purchasing power impact on farmers in that community due to a locally resourced raw material initiative driven by that buying organization. Research on agribusiness supply chain management is essential to better manage the relationships between farmers and consumers to meet consumers' food needs. Of course, there are challenges impacting sustainable agribusiness supply chain can be addressed by keeping in mind the small producers, implementing stringent norms to control product safety and quality. You have to improve industrialization and manage and contain business information. Current and future leaders can benefit from these strategies, such as forecasting and planning deliveries from local producers, stakeholder engagement and communication, organizing and coordinating value chain operations, and financial management. Of course, there were some limitations during my study. I will pick out a few and talk about them. I carried out my study during the peak of the COVID outbreak, and these studies, the interviews were carried out through video conferencing. There have been studies carried out by Irani in 2019 that shows that video conferencing could restrict the researcher's ability to assess the participant's environment, which often provides rich contextual data to situate the interview during data analysis phase. Researchers can also observe a full range of body language and nonverbal communication because of the participant's image is often displayed from the waist up. And also, there's also a limitation from the perspective that when interviewing the participants, they could be reluctant to disclose some strategic information, which they may consider as competitive for the organization as well. Now, but some of these limitations could open doors for future research. A small sample size may not represent the larger agribusiness supply chain managers population in Cameroon. So future researchers should conduct a quantitative methodology study to obtain what you call to obtain data from a much larger sample. Another recommendation is for future researchers to study strategies used by local producers to develop sustainable supply chain links with buying organizations. Take note that in my study, I was looking at strategies used by agribusiness supply chain managers. So strategies used by agribusiness supply chain managers in buying organizations are likely to be different from strategies used by local producers or supplying organizations to promulgate or strengthen sustainable supply chain links between both entities. Now, that said, let's move to slide 8. Slide 8, there you just have a slide 8, just you have some highlights of some of the key references I've used in the PowerPoint, most notably in the problem statement and the content of my presentation. And I'll move to the last slides. To conclude, agribusiness supply chain strategies are essential to developing sustainable supply chain links with local producers to maintain profitability. So agribusinesses relying on their supply chain to remain competitive in a rapidly changing environment must be more agile in perceiving and developing opportunities, more responsive to disruptions, and more resilient against external threats. The findings of this study may be essential to supply chain experts in charge of implementing strategies in companies that consume agricultural commodities as raw materials, and to government officials empowered to enact laws that could favorably impact the agribusiness sector as a whole. So that is the end of my presentation. Once more, I want to thank you for your keen attention. And I will now revert to the moderator to provide responses to any observations or questions. It's time for interaction. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Ngwa. I wanted to turn it over to any of our members that may have a question for Dr. Ngwa. Please, you can unmute yourself or post it in the chat. So I have a question. What was your motivation personally to embark on this research for your study?
Yes. Yes, thanks for your question in terms of my motivation. My motivation stems from my my experience in working in the agribusiness sector, especially from the supply chain perspective, wherein I observed that many of the agribusiness companies that are involved in transformation or manufacturing using raw materials as agricultural raw materials as input have challenges in developing local producers for many reasons. So they tend to source from very far suppliers across the globe. And sometimes they end up with difficulties in terms of meeting delivery timelines. They end up with downtimes in their manufacturing processes, and they end up with some very costly raw materials that are translated into the cost of their final goods, and that makes them less competitive in the local markets. So there was an opportunity for me to ask myself, what's happening with the local producers? How can we help these manufacturing companies develop local producers so that they can have some shared volumes be able to solve some of the supply chain disruptions which they are facing, and have a win-win situation, either with the local government that's probably putting them under peer pressure to encourage local production, local consumption of raw materials, and also solve some of the internal issues that they are having in their manufacturing processes.
Great. And what was your biggest challenge that you faced when doing this research?
Yeah, that's a good question. My biggest challenge that I faced when carrying out the research was to identify the participants that meet the criteria the participants who met the criteria that I wanted, because my research topic was quite streamlined. I didn't just want to talk to any supply chain manager or any supply chain expert. I wanted to talk to a supply chain expert who's been operating in the agribusiness sector. That's one. I wanted to talk to a supply chain expert who has been operating in the agribusiness sector for over 5 years. Local producers. So it was quite tricky to get the right selection. It took me a while, but once I got the right participants using the purposive selective sampling method, I was good to go, and I could immediately feel that from the analysis of the data and the responses that they were giving to me. It means they understood the phenomenon, and they recognized it was a big problem, and they could come up with lots of proposals during the and they could come up with good, reasonable answers to the questions that I posed during the interview process.
Wonderful. Thank you. See, there's a question in the chat. How have you been able to promulgate your findings since completing your research?
Just before I answer the question, that question is coming from my chair. I'm happy that, yeah, so
fantastic.
I'm so happy he's attending this session. I want to recognize his presence. He was a very good source of inspiration to me throughout and very supportive. Good question. This study has led to the birth of a project which I'm currently working on. It's called Aggregates. Aggregates, it's a consultancy product and service firm that is specialized in providing solutions to problems faced by agribusiness institutions in developing local supply chains. Because it's also, my study has also caught a lot of interest in the country. Many people are asking for my help, from my experience, to provide solutions and to draw learnings from the study that I carried out. And and see how I can be of help or support to them. Now, what I must highlight is that obviously when you are carrying out this kind of research, what you end up putting as your research report or your thesis report, it's probably about 40% of all the information you come across, because you have to stick to your problem statement and how your study is streamlined. But so there's quite a lot of information which I came across during this study, which I'm currently also using and providing support to other experts in the field and also other institutions who are facing such challenges.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
Please, if there are not questions, I don't know if my chair can say a word, if that's allowed. If not,
Oh, fantastic. We'd love to hear from Dr. Gottlieb. I'm going to click the unmute. Dr. Gottlieb?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. Welcome.
Wonderful. Well, it is a pleasure to see Edwin present in the symposium. I really enjoyed working with him. I thought his research topic was very appropriate given some of the effects of global warming on agriculture, and particularly in Africa and the area, the geographic area that Edwin lives and so forth. And I'm pleased to know that he has used his work. I found him to be an exceptional student, by the way, and you can probably see in his presentation, well organized and very knowledgeable. And I wish him good luck in continuing his work and also impact on the local region. Agriculture is certainly an essential part of our social structure. So it was a real pleasure to see Edwin present today. Thank you very much for allowing me to be a part of the meeting.
Absolutely. Well, it's been my pleasure being your moderator and learning more about this and the in-depth research that you have conducted. And it's always great to see the chairs on the line supporting. So thank you so much. And yes, congratulations, Dr. Ngwa.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments in the chat? All right. Well, once again, I would like to thank you for attending.